On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us again. We've just heard from Megan Edwards about the power of LinkedIn and how you can actually leverage that as part of your global branding strategy and help with your trade opportunities as well. Now we're joined by James King from AFEX, and there's so much to talk about. James, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure, Lawrence. Great to see you again.
You too, mate. Cheers. James, I mean, we've got so much to discuss. The coronavirus, how's that currently impacting the Aussie dollar, and what do you see happening at the moment over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, sure. So we saw a fairly decent size impact in the currency side of things. The coronavirus kicked in around sort of mid-January, and at that point in time, the Aussie dollar was trading roughly around the 69 cent level against the USD. As the month progressed, though, we saw the Aussie dollar drop towards the post-GFC lows around 66.70. Yeah. So it lost about 2.5 cents in a very short period of time. 2.5 cents might not sound like a lot, but if you put it in percentage terms, it was around about sort of 4.5%. Wow. And at the moment, prior to the coronavirus kicking in, volatility in the markets was close to a 30-year low at that point in time as well. So to see a 4% move or thereabouts, whilst volatility is so low, is actually a decent sized move. So the Aussie dollar has borne the brunt of that coronavirus pandemic, as we've seen with the way the market's moved. Yep. We have bottomed out at the moment, but it's early days, and as you sort of said there in the intro, there's still a lot for us to dissect in the weeks and months ahead, as we judge the economic impact of the pandemic.
And I think, James, typically when the Aussie dollar goes down is generally good for Aussie exporters. But if so many exports that may be heading to China, then you've got a bit of a double-edged sword here. So you can't really export to the major market, taking our resource sectors and some of the agribusiness that typically would embrace that dollar drop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is a double-edged sword, and you could probably give some insight into this as well, Lawrence, through your contacts and associations. But from the supply chain side of things, I mean, we've heard rumours there that there's ships that aren't necessarily sailing to Australia at the moment because they don't have a full cargo. So Australia as a destination is not an ideal scenario for these shipping magnates, and as a result, our export side of things, they rely on those empty ships to be able to send their product back over to China as well. So that's from the supply side,
absolutely,
supply chain angle. But from an economic standpoint, that's going to have ramifications, of course, for Australia, but also for other parts of the world as well. And Australia does rely on other parts of the world also for the way in which it performs economically. And from a currency standpoint, the Aussie dollar performs best when the economic environment is moving ahead.
Yeah, and that's what I heard an economist yesterday, I can't remember which one it was, talking about this could really push Australia into a recession with the coronavirus. Now, it sounds pretty dire, but when you think about the supply chain practical impacts, air freight has been severely impacted because so many airlines have stopped going in and out of China. As you say, sea freight has been impacted already because carriers are either calling off vessel schedules or trying to consolidate them onto a single sailing, so you're missing a couple of sailing schedules. But importantly as well, James, is that when you look at the actual province of Wuhan, where this coronavirus has outbroken, and that basically put a ring around it, a fence around it. There's so many major manufacturing hubs that not only Australia but the globe relies on. So it's one of the biggest automotive sectors for manufacturing. So there's some really major electronic companies who produce out of Wuhan. So those global supply chain impacts are being felt now, and the longer it continues, that whole supply chain literally will start to dry up, because if there's no workers in those factories doing the work, there's nothing getting out of those factories. Yes. You've got an impact of, let's say car parts. If your car goes off the road and you send it down to a dealership to get a service done, and you've got no parts coming in for a month, it's going to have some dramatic impacts for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're going to be driving around in the Corolla for a little while.
Like you said, Corolla, not Corona.
That's right.
I did see a funny post actually about the coronavirus, and I'm moving a classic car buff, so there was an old Corona full of rust, and it actually said, coronavirus has hit here as well. But we're probably old enough to remember the old Corollas and Coronas. But
sadly so.
But I wanted to ask about the other thing that's happened this week was the Trump acquittal, and how that's maybe impacting on the markets as well.
Yeah, it's a funny story, really. I mean, it's the whole process that's undertaken there. Given the way that the two houses of Parliament there are populated by the two parties, two major parties, it was going to be very difficult for this impeachment to be able to proceed because of the the Republicans having so much clout there in that particular house. So when it was acquitted there, just a couple of days ago, I mean, I guess a few of us there in the office sort of had a bit of a joke about it. It was just a bit of a PR stunt in the end because we never thought it was ever going to go anywhere. It probably hides a lot of problems with the political system. In fact, we're seeing some of those at the moment in the Australian political system as well, from a trust perspective. But from a market's perspective, it's probably calmed the market just somewhat. There was a little bit priced in of the potential of what might happen if Trump was to be impeached, but the market really hadn't. There
was no confidence that was going to happen.
It wasn't high, no. So when it happened, there was a little fanfare from the market's perspective. The market's really taking more direction from things like the coronavirus, but also just with the financial markets at the moment receiving such a boost from money flowing in from the Federal Reserve, they're the things that are really driving things at the moment.
Yeah. And James, the other one I wanted to ask you about, we had Dave McCready from the British Chamber of Commerce on last Friday talking about UK's exit of the EU.
Yeah.
So the whole kick-off of Brexit. Did that have a blip on the screen at all? Did that affect the Aussie dollar or the other markets?
It did, it did. The sterling being the main currency that's impacted by what takes place in Brexit. The sterling actually started to appreciate quite considerably in the lead up. So throughout last year, post the UK elections, when Boris Johnson was re-elected, the sterling actually started to appreciate quite considerably against the US dollar and against other currencies as well. Just in January as well, we've seen that appreciation maintain, and leading up to the official exit point, which was the end of January, the sterling was remained fairly supported at that point in time. In the last couple of days, we've seen it just start to retract a little bit, the sterling. That's probably a little bit to do with the fact that we're sort of in that sort of we're sort of in that unknown period now where they've left, but we've got 11 months of them now starting to talk about what the divorce deal looks like. They've officially left, but there's no trade deal or the like that's been implemented at this point in time. Unfortunately, we've got 11 more months of us talking about it, Lawrence. I thought we might have been having some reprieve in 2020, but not at this stage. So we're likely to see the markets ebb and flow depending on what's sort of transpiring in those discussions.
Well, there are some really good things happening from what I understand with some FTAs, both with the UK and with the EU. So there's definitely some stuff going on over the next 11 months.
The interesting thing on that is that the EU doesn't necessarily have a free trade agreement with any jurisdiction out there. They've always got tariffs or quotas inbuilt into their trade agreements. So if they adopt that same philosophy with the UK, then it's not going to be the same trading arrangement that they've had previously whilst the UK was in the EU. So that's going to be something to closely watch as well, to see if there are any of those quotas, etc., inbuilt into that agreement. Yeah,
I definitely want to ask probably after the break around what countries are winners and losers out of the UK and Euro split, because you look at places like Germany and then you look at places like Greece, and they've all got different types of levels of speed of their economies and different growth factors. And if you take UK out of the mix, how does that change that dynamic and the power plays of those things? So it's an interesting talk. And we were going to be joined by Mary Jardine Clark. Unfortunately, she's having technical issues this morning, so she can't join us. But I'm going to ask both of you to fill in the gap, and we're going to talk about the EU and UK exit impacts, and talk about what that means from a opportunity point of view as well for Australian businesses. But maybe if we can do that after the break, that'd be great. So what we're going to do now is just cut to a break, and I'll come back and we'll just delve a little bit deeper into the UK and European Union strategy. Great.